Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Nightingale. Chris, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's really nice to be talking to you.
Brilliant. Good to speak to you too, Luca.
Fantastic. Now, in the world of e-commerce, especially e-commerce PPC, I would dare to say that there are very few people who don't know you, because in PPC, I guess you got quite a name for yourself and you've been in the game for a long time. But for those that are listening or watching that perhaps don't know who you are, do you mind giving everybody a little bit of an introduction to Chris Nightingale?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, my name's Chris Nightingale. I'm currently working as a PPC manager within AO.com. So yeah, kind of straight out of the box, been involved with PPC straight out of university. Been in a number of roles, both client side and agency side, and kind of really specialised in that retail role. So helping a lot of clients and people, really just helping understand all that data and the nitty gritty of the Google and the Bing worlds, YouTube worlds, everything like that, and just almost creating that perfect succinct strategy, because it's crazy how much Google's changed over these last few years, and there's that definite wave of automation that's coming through. And I think just to be able to allow retailers, and specifically AO, to take that challenge and grab it with both hands within the PPC world is going to be really important. So that's where I'm up to at the moment. Been in PPC, gosh, coming up to a decade now, I'd say, which is feels like a long time. But I'm sure we've got some other people who easily beat that figure. So yeah.
Yeah, you have an incredible experience in PPC, and looking at you, which is a compliment, by the way. You look like mid-20s, so you started really early.
Yeah, baby face, that's for sure.
That's a good thing. I wish I had that. So, but obviously you did start PPC very early after uni. And the question that always interests me to find the answer of is, what drew you to PPC? What was the driving? What made you go, oh, I want to do PPC. I want to do the Google ads.
Yeah, I think the main thing with Google, and what's really fascinating, is it's the breadth of data. I think there's not one person that hasn't actually done a Google search in some time in their life. And the things that Google are doing every day to make more people search, they're joining up YouTube, they're bringing in audiences. It really fascinated me. And it was when I was back at university in 2010, you really sort of understood, right, if anyone's doing marketing, the first place you go to is a Google search. Yeah. You see all these advertisers come up. And that's not to say that, TV isn't flashy and it's nice and it's interesting to do creative for. And it's not to say that offline media isn't important. But I think the speed of online and the reaction times you get from people, and being able to see that data really clearly in that omnichannel approach is just, it's what drew me to it. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's that bottom of the funnel step, isn't it? When people have more or less made up their mind, they know they have a problem of some sort, they know there's a solution, and now they look into that solution, right? So it's very reactive there. I guess the lead time is quite short, right?
Yeah, for sure. But I guess at the same perspective, right, you've kind of got to make sure those upper channels are equally on top of it and all over it. So, my job's almost the easiest in some regards, because we're getting those people that are in market ready to buy, but especially at AO, it starts much higher funnel.
That's fine. I mean, I was really trying to aim, and that's the beauty of these improvised questions, that I was really aiming at getting your story first. But you said something that I think is very fascinating for the audience, which is you needed the upper funnel channels to support PPC, which it's something that I couldn't agree with more. And I find, having worked with hundreds of global brands and some small brands as well, that a lot of people use the right channel with the wrong metric, i.e. expecting, for example, the PPC metric from a Facebook ad campaign. And we know that that doesn't work, right? What would be your advice for somebody wanting to invest in upper funnel channels to then help PPC and other bottom of the funnel channels perform? What would your advice be to these people?
Yeah, I think the main thing is making sure they got that view of data and that they know the data is correct, right? Data is probably the most complex issue that any marketer has in this world today, and making sure that their attribution models are absolutely spot on, making sure they can see that end-to-end customer journey, and not to be working within those channels individually. You've got to have a person or a company or whatever it is that almost has that collective view of all the channels and can kind of go, right, that channel has this impact and this impact. So we work with a few companies that kind of help do that. And I think it's really important that marketers know each individual value of each individual stage. And that really funnels down in terms of a tree map, right? So you need to know, if they say this keyword over this keyword, what's the value of that keyword? What's the value of that user behind the keyword? And it's quite an interesting point, because I think audiences are almost so much more important than the keyword itself, right? So if we can know on the website that they've looked at Samsung washing machines that are 7 kilogram that are red, it doesn't matter if they just go back onto a website and can't type in washing machines, because we already might be able to gather that all that data about them that tells us, right, this is actually how we can change that marketing strategy depending on what you've done with us before, how you bought with us before, what you might do in the future. So all that data is more important than just that keyword now, and it's really interesting.
It is really interesting. And we'll definitely get back to data later on, because there is an element, especially at the brand like AO, where I don't know how many SKUs you have, but you have many products, right?
Yeah, a lot of products.
That's right. And all different, from different, probably targeting to different markets, you know, from people that just bought a house to people that need to replace the machine that they bought from you 3 years before or 4 years before. So it's very interesting. And I'd really like to touch on that. But before we get there, so you got out of uni, going to PPC, and did you go agency side at first?
Yeah, so start off agency side. I had a bit of both agency and client side experiences. As you can imagine, very different experiences, but learned a lot from both, absolutely.
And you were at MediaCom for a while, right?
Yeah, MediaCom for I think 2.5, 3 years, something like that.
Right. And was that really to increase your knowledge and really refine your skills in marketing in general, or was it a PPC role specifically?
Yeah, so it's still very much PPC specific. I think the good side of agency side was that you can almost have a bit of a taste of many different clients and kind of dip your toe in many different retails, finance, all that sort of good stuff. And that's almost kind of led me down the path of, right, I really want to focus on retail. That's what I'm good at. That's what I focus on. But yeah, agency side was, it was a lot quicker paced in terms of how they deal with different clients, and you've got to spread your time quite thinly. I think the great place where I'm at now is I'm able to dedicate 100% of my time to a particular business and really get into the nitty gritty of kind of the marketing that sits behind the PPC.
Yeah. Okay, here's a question that you might or might not have the answer for, and you might or might not want to give me the answer. So when I started in PPC, it was 2004, and AdWords didn't have many clients. It wasn't the business it is today. What made me fall in love with Google, and then now I'm obviously a strategist more than a technician, so to speak, but I wanted to kind of put my fingers into the channels, into what I call the dirt, to understand it, and then have great people do it like yourself. Technology is becoming useful to the point where it's credible now. But a few years ago, we were like, well, automation, it just doesn't work. I mean, we built a bid automation tool at Genie Goals and Genie Ventures because of that reason. And now it's widely accepted that you use a bid management tool. But there are pieces of technology that do a lot more. And I think they become incredible. But obviously, at the beginning, like anything, new stuff can break, and new stuff can have these unforeseen, perhaps, mistakes. How do you mitigate that when you train younger people, for example, when you train people that perhaps are in PPC for a year or two? How do you mitigate? How do you teach these people to have that eye that perhaps you can only develop through experience to watch out for A, B, and C? What do you do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's all about trust inevitably. So I think for the guys, it's to learn what control that automation has. And almost then checking in on almost the weak points within that to say, right, if it's going to make some changes between 10 and 12, let's make sure we're all over it between 10 and 12. And it's just gaining trust through time, So once we have control over it for a day, let's have control over it for a week. If we have control over it for a week, we can trust it for a month. And to have that slow sort of build up rather than just chucking all the data at the tech and letting it do its thing is massively valuable. I think giving the tech the right data is always going to be valuable. So if we're just chucking at useless information of conversions that are wrong, it's not going to be able to learn quickly. So one of the presentations I did, it's effectively the computer only mirrors what the person or the data we want it to be. So if we're feeding it NAF data, it's never going to be able to do anything properly with that data. Right. But just to revert back to kind of how we train people, or how I think we should train people, I think it's just, it's all about trust, showing them the basics, going right back to the very basics of PPC, which is your bid, your keyword, your hourly trends reports, and then being able to build that and layer that with automation, almost to safeguard that is kind of where I think people should be.
That's a great approach, I think, and I share that view. So at Genie, that's what we try to do is to base training and motivation of staff on 3 pillars, which is the ability to know how to do the job. So that's mastery, a big sense of purpose so that we share our vision and they know that we're doing more than just one campaign, more than just one client. We're doing it for a bigger reason, right? And the third is autonomy, is exactly what you're talking about. And the ability to go out and make some decisions and make some mistakes, knowing that a mistake won't get you in trouble. And to do that, I feel you have to build boundaries, right? Where they can play and make decisions. And if they make a mistake, it's not going to be a crucial mistake, right? So
Yeah.
what we did was a layer of people within the team that has control over certain things. Do you do the same thing? Do you have people that control a certain amount of stuff and then
Yeah.
others that control a bigger picture?
Yeah, it's hugely important. I think I've done this many different ways within certain businesses. So you'd have either people that have certain category controls. So for example, you'd have control over this portion of the business, or people that specialize within certain layers. So audiences, as an example, or keywords or reporting. And that way they kind of have a more holistic approach, but deeply narrowed within a particular aspect of PPC. So there's very two ways of doing it, horizontally or vertically, and both have pros and cons. But I think for me, it's almost about making sure that people within our teams can really get that breadth and depth view of Google as a whole, rather than focusing very specific on one portion, because no one's going to learn that way, right? Everyone wants to be a fully rounded marketer, and you're only going to really do that if you have visibility of every single aspect of Google, Bing, YouTube, display, everything like that. So yeah.
And then there's a lot to be said for experience. Right? You can teach things, but ultimately you develop that almost gut feeling for things, that ability to spot things without having to analyze it consciously, that can only come with experience. So I guess patience is probably a big role for you, a big element for you guys, right?
Massively, yeah. And I think just to add to that as well, kind of having that eye for detail, or knowing when things are going wrong, that's what we're training those automation pieces to be. So I think there's various scripts out there, or scripts that people have built, where you train it to look at certain pieces of data, and if it falls within outside of those normal pieces or anomalies, it'll flag that up. So we can obviously feed into that, right, look between X and Y, or look at this metric over that metric. But inevitably we're trusting the automation, the tools, to say that's wrong or this is wrong, which frees us up to think, right, what more strategic things can we do on the accounts, rather than kind of just the core PPC. But that's not to say the core PPC is a waste of time, or it's not crucial. It's to say it frees our mind to be able to focus on those really core strategic tests that are market changing, really.
Absolutely. And that's what I always say to brands, in a slightly different context, but very similar, certainly of similar effect, when they ask me, should we use an agency or should we do it in-house? And that greatly depends on the maturity of the brand and the requirements and many other things. But for those that do use in-house teams, which I think for certain brands is absolutely the right thing to do, there's space to use agencies for their high-level strategic input, because they work across many different industries, different brands, and they have access to perhaps different level of support within the providers. And I think, as you said, is using the resources that you have for absolutely the right thing that drives the biggest impact towards it. Now, for those that are not very technical, just bear with us for a moment, because I have a technical question, or it could be technical. And then we're going to go back to the bigger picture. Now, the technical question that I have is about data. You talked a lot about data and how important it is to feed the right data and to let the technology do its magic, which I totally agree. What do you do? For a brand like AO, you've got legacy, so it's probably a bit easier, but what would you recommend for perhaps a brand that doesn't have all those years of history to interpret the data after a holiday season, after Black Friday, after Christmas, after a period where perhaps you see a lot of spikes? How do you use that data?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think a lot of businesses during that period and after that period will almost be overwhelmed. There's that much data. But there are really some really good key trends you can learn from it, in terms of just looking at the search query reports, looking at keyword planners, looking at Google Trends. There's a lot of features that Google provide out there that can tell you not just what you're doing and not the results you've driven, but what the industry has seen shift or the industry has seen change. And they're really, really valuable tools. Just recently, over this recent few tough months of COVID, Google have brought out kind of new tools in place that kind of show you when new queries have spiked, or kind of what's really piquing the interest. So that really allows us to capture that demand, or those keywords that we might want to go over, even if we've got no data to back up to say it's worth going after. So things like that are hugely valuable, and it's being used more and more, and Google know that. So they're trying to almost adapt to how the market shifts. And it's really allowing advertisers to jump on new keywords they might not even thought about, but are definitely worth testing, and that advertisers might not even be on. So really good opportunities.
So what I'm hearing there, if I'm correct, is that yes, you look at the historic data of what's happened yesterday, today, an hour ago, and so on, but you also look at the trends to inform the future decisions, right?
Yeah, massively. Yeah, and things are always going to be changing, right? So the data that we look at needs to be as fresh as it can be, to make sure that all the stuff we're doing in the future matches up to what the customer wants. And what the customer wants is always going to be changing. So, we might know now that people might not want to visit shops, people might want to buy online, and people might not want to wait in the queues. They might want to get things instantly or next day. So for us to be able to fill that gap is crucially important. And we're kind of there as almost to listen to customers and listen to what they want and play with that.
I'm loving that you're using the word want, what customers want. I think many marketers I come across insist on selling what customers need. And I think both know that, people don't buy what they need, they buy what they want, right? So
yeah.
It's a side topic, which I think is very interesting. Now on data again, and I think you mentioned COVID, right? So I'm very interested, I'm very curious to know how a brand like AO and a person like you in charge of a very big channel for a very big brand with, selling goods that are expensive to make. So they're not those kind of goods where the margins are crazy high. So you need to be really careful, right? Interpreting the data that comes in. And COVID seems to have taken all the data and just crunched them up and said they don't mean anything anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because everything changed. How did you guys cope and how did you adapt? What happened at AO? And what was your role in adapting to this new world, this new normal?
Yeah, massively. I think the main thing we've had to do is just listen to how we personally have changed, staff within the business. How have we had to evolve and change? People working from home, what does that mean for our customers? We're at a time now where people are stress testing things at home like never before. They're using maybe some new work laptops. They're even entertaining themselves. They're using the fridge more maybe for lunches at home. And all of that stuff means that we've got customers that are using appliances more than ever before. And we're seeing demand go up on the back of that. So it's really important that we're understanding maybe if those use cases have changed, what's different. People aren't in the office as much, that are at home. What does that mean for our customer? How do we talk to that customer in a new way that reflects that? And how do we give them what they want or what they need? People storing medicines in their fridge, for example, that's more of a need, I'd say. Or maybe a TV is definitely a want. Not everyone needs a TV as such, but to be able to be reactive and almost beat the competition is kind of what we hope to do. And we've got many great things that are in our favor to allow us to do that.
Right, so you saw demand spiking, obviously the team became distributed inevitably, right? What would you say, the biggest challenges that you had to face? I mean, firstly, actually, how big is your team, the team that you manage directly?
Yeah, so I think with my team personally, we've got about 5 people. So relatively small in the grand scheme of teams, I guess, but enough to keep me busy for sure.
Well, you have 5 lives, right?
Yeah.
Emotional well-being, and you don't see them every day.
To touch on that, it's really important because I think one of the things you realize as you go from an exec or an assistant to a manager level is, that you're in charge of their personal development. You're in charge of making sure they can be the best person they can be, and you're not hindering or stopping that at all. So to change from manager, when I did in 2016, was a huge step in my career to really understand not just the tech, which, arguably, and not to pat myself on the back, I'm really good at, but also the people side, which is a huge skill within itself to understand how to work with people, how to get the best out of people, how to have those difficult conversations. So yeah, it's been a huge learning curve that I've hopefully come over now, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and as you said, tech, you can learn tech, and ultimately, most of the times, if tech doesn't work, is because the human has inputted the wrong data, right? The wrong information, the wrong instruction. Humans don't quite work like that, right? You can do exactly the same thing with 2 different individuals, and you have 2 different outcomes. So it's a challenging task during a challenging time. And a team of 5, you mentioned, is not big, but there's 5 lives, there's 5 set of needs, there's 5 set of emotions. So I guess it's quite hard in an environment where it's not to say that AO saw a decline in demand, so you could just quote unquote relax. You had to work even more than before, and now you have a distributed team. What would you say was the biggest lesson that you learned from that, and what would your advice be for somebody that perhaps is going through this still now?
I'd say that the main thing is to make sure that everyone's prepared for things like this, or it's showing us now we need to be more prepared than ever before for like Black Friday. And Black Friday is, an absolute massive part of the year for us. And I suspect it is for a lot of other retailers as well. And it shows that we need to just be really synced up and, thinking about marketing teams to trade teams, to stock teams, to finance teams, to that whole journey needs to be so aligned and succinct that if there's any reactive changes in the market, we're like snappy into it. And, luckily we have been, and we've done a really good job in doing that. So my advice to other businesses would be to make sure that those companies are super, super close. If you've got one agency that's looking at SEO and another that's looking at PPC and another that's looking at stock, for example, make sure they're talking to each other, make sure they're they're consistently in communication, or make sure it's a one port of call, make sure it's that one individual that's taking accountability for everything, because otherwise you're going to have a disjointed approach where you're not able to win, or you're going to certainly lose from such situations over Black Friday or Christmas, whatever it might be. So I think preparedness is absolutely crucial.
What a great point. And also you mentioned the need to be cohesive, to be collaborative across channels, across agencies. Again, going back to data, I know that you have a soft spot for AI, right?
Yes,
So,
definitely.
well, what's the story there? Where did this love affair start?
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one. So I originally just started to get more into scripts, and as scripts came out, I started to think, right, okay, maybe I'm not going to be a developer. You know, I haven't got the skills to be in the nitty gritty coding, but how can I influence all this new technology coming out to really capitalize on marketing and within particular PPC marketing? So I started to listen to blogs, I started to listen to YouTube videos, I started to get an understanding of TEDx talks and kind of what that might involve, and how I could get involved. And I started to really understand there's a lot of people that are writing a lot of work about AI and automation, and particularly about how we can use it within marketing. And it's still really, really new. If you look at, there's a book that I read the other day called The Glass Cage, which was all about a Boeing pilot that I think was essentially flying itself. And it's all about how, okay, we can trust these things, but you still need the pilot there in case things go wrong. You still need the tech there, and we still need the creativity, which I still think is a human trait, to guide that automation and to guide the AI to make the right decisions for us. So that's kind of how it's all come about and kind of what I'm reading. I've definitely got a few book recommendations if anyone listening wants some, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, I think you should absolutely mention your top 3 books in AI.
Great. I've bought them here. I've got written them down actually. So The Glass Cage is definitely one of them. A couple of other ones is Life 3.0, The Creativity Code, How to Be Creative and Resilient in a Tidy Minded World, and a manifesto for distant creatives as well. So really, really good books about creativity.
Fantastic. We'll make sure to include the links to the show notes. That's great. I mean, I feel, but books are like movies. You invest time, right? I don't know about you, but you seem like a pretty busy guy, and it's hard to say, okay, I'm gonna put 2 hours aside to just watch a movie tonight. You want to watch a good one, right?
Yeah.
And when people recommend books, and people like you who have been there, and it's always a massive shortcut for me. That's very valuable. So I would actually pay for somebody to go and shortlist all the good stuff to read.
Yeah, definitely. I read one the other day called, it's one of the TEDx talks on how to be sort of public speaking. So for me, public speaking is very, very new. And, I've only done 1 or 2 sort of talks in my time, but I don't mean to sidetrack too much, but books are really useful in terms of bridging that gap. And yes, YouTube videos help, but to sort of just read it in black and white and sort of get that experience was useful. And I don't think enough people read books, to be honest, these days. It's almost like a bit of a dying trend, I feel. But for my knowledge, they've been really good.
I agree. I think reading is vital. And actually, let's take a slight sidestep, and I'm going to present perhaps a divisive statement. I feel you're right. I think reading is becoming less popular than it should be. But also I see on the other side of the spectrum, some people that raise are reading, every CEO should read 52 books a year, which I totally disagree with. I think reading is important, but implementing is so much more important. So read a book and then implement what you can. Read another, well, actually, I would argue read a chapter and implement what you can, read the second chapter and so on. What's your take when you read books? You obviously read very technical books, and AI really overlaps on philosophy and psychology a lot. So
yeah,
you take that approach. Do you learn and implement?
Yeah, and I think it's a really good approach for not just reading books, but for anything, right? So if you've read a chapter, I think it's really important to think, how can I apply that within my own business? Same for a presentation that you've done, same for a talk like this one we've just done, almost to reflect after that and think, right, what 3 things have I learned in that session that I can go away and implement myself? And too many times you'd go to a conference or you go to a meeting and you come out of it and you think, okay, and you've got your notes and you just drop it. So I think that's definitely what I was guilty of when I first started out in PPC marketing. And now I think it's crucial that people have that self-reflection time to think about how it applies, because at the end of the day, speeches that people give aren't super relevant to your business unless it's a pitch or something like that. So we almost need to join the dots and think, right, how can that particular thing they've shown me be relevant to my business? So yeah, really, really, really interesting stuff. On the TEDx talk one, it was really interesting just to learn about how particular people have gone through particular experiences And that almost set me up to think, right, if this happens during my speech or my talk, this is how I might react. If I get a tricky question, this is how I might deflect it or answer it. So to have that knowledge in my back pocket was really useful. And that's not something you're going to learn from just watching somebody do a TEDx talk. Is that behind the scenes as to how to really react to something.
Oh, that's fantastic. There's some good golden nuggets, as I call them, right there. So, in the spirit of what we just said, I invite everybody who's newer to either AI, PPC, or public speaking to make notes and go and implement, learn a little, implement a lot, right?
Massively, yeah.
That's fantastic to hear. Now, AO is a company that you've been with for a while. And obviously it's obvious by hearing you talk that you have passion for what you do, you have passion for the role, you have passion for the company. What would you say is one of the most amazing, most remarkable things of working at AO?
Yeah, massively. I think the culture of AO is great. So we always work within that one AO framework. So whether it's our UK office or our Germany office, we're always really combined. I think one of the things that John Roberts, our big boss, has kind of said is, we've got to work to make our nan proud. And that's kind of how we strive every day. And it's got that really good team philosophy about AO, which I love. And I think, just looking at a few examples over the company, we're really, really good at delivering those customer needs. So just to think about one off the top of my head, I think we had a few delivery drivers a few years back where they were getting this appliance and they realized the appliance was over this little bridge into somebody's house and they couldn't get there because the lorry wouldn't go over the bridge. So I think they managed to find a boat and they rowed over to deliver the appliance to that person's house. And it's just little nuggets like that where AO is coming together, AO is overcoming problems, AO is working as a team to make sure we're meeting customer expectations and achieving customer expectations is something we're striving to do as a business. And I think just to go back to the one AO philosophy, it's been really important for me personally to be able to sort of join teams together and share things across every different team, because as I'm sure you're aware in your business, there'll be niches or pockets where you think, gosh, this one thing, if I apply it across everything else, we can improve so much. And to have that shareability factor is massive within any business.
Yeah, that was a lovely story of that customer service piece. And yes, I'm 100% aligned. I think it's so important to develop a culture that is collaborative, that is inclusive, and that is bigger picture. I love making our mama proud. It's fantastic. The one AO, it's funny, we have the one Genie, because although Genie is a tiny company compared, as you know, we have the CSS team, and then we have the PPC team and the paid social and so on. And it's so important to what I call cross-pollinate, right? To get the information to flow. And I guess is the same. It's probably important for suppliers and partners, right? So you choose providers to work with, and I'm proud to say that Genie is one of them. So thank you for the trust over the advance. But what's important for you in a partner? What do you like most when you find a partner that you enjoy working with? What is that element? What is that set of elements that make you go, oh, I love working with these guys?
Yeah, I think we've got the first and foremost is they know what they're doing, but they really trust and they love the brand. So we've had instances before where suppliers that have cropped up with the green AO watch or the green t-shirt, the green shoes, and to have that love for our brand by the agency or by a provider is really important. But aside from that, it's to really understanding and know our customer equally, or if not better than us. And that's a big challenge because we know our customers very well. But to have someone come in, we're almost really wanting them to provide that value that we don't have. And that's really what we're looking for, is to have that brand admiration, that brand understanding, and really getting under the nail of what we need and what we want.
And how easy is it to find in partners?
It's a challenge. Yeah, I think as you can imagine, it's a very big challenge. The particular people that may not fit the bill versus fit the bill. But it's all about, sticking out RFPs and going over people and just casting the net wide and seeing what people can do for you.
Right. Just a couple of last questions, because I know you're a super busy guy. So the first one is for peers, for e-commerce brands, right? There's a large amount of brands that look up to you guys, for reasons that you mentioned in the culture, the customer service, which is it's very well known. What would your advice be for a brand that strives to grow and maintain that culture, maintain that making the mama proud motto? What would your advice be for those brands, and particularly for people in your role in those brands? What can they do to influence perhaps a larger set of teams?
Yeah, I think for those guys, it's a case of championing that area, becoming really proficient within a certain area of tech, and then just being able to share that across a wide set of people. Being shareable, and having that shareability factor is definitely an underutilized part of businesses in general, I found. So we almost need to break down those internal barriers within a business between one team and another, and just be able to share that common knowledge, include everyone in everything that we're doing. And that way everyone's going to learn. You're going to make your mum or your nana proud. And it's going to mean that everyone wins because everyone's got that knowledge. There's nothing worse in the business, I think, than one person having all the knowledge, and they're implementing it great. But, if they go the next day, then you've lost all that potential knowledge that could be shared across the business. So to have that people or that team or that company that really knows everything and there's no gaps within its data or knowledge is massively important.
So that's learning, that's teaching, and that's sharing, right?
Yeah.
So how do you guys facilitate at the practical level? Do you guys give your teams a certain amount of time that they can dedicate to doing these activities?
Yeah, definitely. There's definitely tools and websites out there, like the Google Ads Academy or the Skill Shop, as things it's now called, is a massively useful free tool where people can learn almost anything that Google offers. And I definitely encourage our guys to spend time on that. We've got lots of great in-house training that we do. Also working with suppliers, the likes of Adobe or Google, really, really key, because those are the guys that are building the products. Those are the guys that can talk to the developers specifically changing the product. And if we can influence that, if we can get in things that we know might work for our customers, then it's kind of a win-win for everybody, because it means our marketing is more effective. It means that we're going to spend more money, and it means that we're going to be able to make more money off the back of that as well.
And if there was a product, a training product that doesn't exist right now, right? Because obviously you're right, there are resources out there. And you also mentioned earlier that a lot of the stuff is slightly more generic. It's not necessarily tailored to it. For example, in e-commerce, brand with many SKUs, right? If there was something that you could really use within your team to do with PPC training, what would that be? What would be, if you could choose between, 5 or 6 modules, what would be the module that you would create for your team to go and learn?
Probably automation, reporting and scripting, because if you think about PPC in its absolute core, there's a lot of kind of nitty gritty, which the tech can really take control of. But we still have to understand that, and we still have to understand how coding works, how it will impact our Google activity. So for any sort of marketer out there, I'd kind of be the forefront of AI. What's AI doing? What AI could do, and how it all interlinks with each other, because it is a massively huge, complex operation, right? With the API and it calling to websites and scraping things, and with its smart bidding, and there's so much terminology going around, it could be really, really confusing. But I think to get an understanding of how automation can play a role in a business is going to help any business succeed and be able to save time and use that time on more strategic marketing activities.
That's fantastic. That's a really good tip, and I'm sure somebody will be making that kind of training product tomorrow.
Brilliant.
So before I let you go to your busy schedule, is there anything else you would like me to ask you that I haven't, first of all?
No, I don't think there is. No.
Okay, then I will ask you one last question, which is, as a busy professional, a busy person, you seem like the kind of person that values sport and physical health and working out and so on. How do you balance everything? What's your advice for somebody exactly in your shoes, PPC manager for an important brand with a team? You say little team, I say 5 people it's a responsibility. How do you manage everything and having a passion for AI that is ever evolving? Also quite some time reading 100 books.
Yeah.
How do you do all of that?
It's important to have boundaries and switch off and be able to segment your time into different buckets. So I appreciate that's 10 times harder it is working from home than it is working to the office. But every time I finish a day at work, no matter what time it is, I get out and just drive. And even though I'm driving out and to the same location, it gives you that break or that distance to say, right, I've finished work. I can now start book time, or I can start reading time, or I can start whatever it is. It divides that time up. And I think just portioning your time throughout the day to almost hard stopping. So if you've done something, a task that's taken you an hour, and you're slipping to 2 hours, you need to just stop and move on to the next task and revisit that another time, because balancing personal and professional life is very difficult. And especially in these times, we've all so limited in how we used to be able to get out, with it being running once time a day or something like that. So just get out, enjoy yourself, have that freedom, have that switch off time. And then when you come and switch on, you're going to be 10 times more productive because you've had that time away to think. And that goes back to where your computer is as well, right? Don't have your computer in somewhere where you want that switch off time. Don't have it in the living room. Don't have it somewhere specific like that. Have it in its own room. Have it in the kitchen. Have it in a study. Have it outside if you want. And therefore, when you do come to relax in your living room or whatever it is, you're not in the same space. So that's a massive tip that I give to any company in terms of working from home.
I totally subscribe to that. We started thinking like the world, I believe, this is going to be like 6-7 weeks max. And now, we're not going to open the office until September. And so we are actually turning the garage into an office
Oh,
because
brilliant.
of the exact reason. I totally agree with you. It's important. So go for a pretend commute. Yeah.
Yep.
Don't work in the same place that you relax. Right.
Yep. Set
And keep
yourself
reading,
boundaries.
set boundaries and keep reading AI, right? Because AI,
Yeah, absolutely. The most important bit.
how many times have you watched iRobot?
Oh, too many to count.
Chris,
There's,
this has been a blast. Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for putting yourself out there, which I think it's remarkable in itself. And if there is anything else you want the audience to hear, this is your time.
yeah, no worries. I think, yeah, there's nothing else for me really, other than keep reading about AI. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn as well. My name's Chris Nightingale. And if, we want to continue the chat about AI further, then happy to spill my guts and all the knowledge that I have. So yeah.
And I'm sure that Chris will also be able to tell you how happy he is with our work.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we work with you guys from our shopping perspective. And I have got to say, all the support we've had from you guys has helped us through rather complex procedures and stuff. So yeah, I really appreciate your help through that.
Oh, that means a lot. It makes us want to work a lot harder when we hear feedback like that. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Chris, thanks so much for your time. It's been a blast, and we'll touch base again.
Great. Cheers, Luca. I'll speak to you soon.
All right, take care.
Cheers. Bye.